is the youngest Fisher child, and the only daughter. We meet her towards the end of her high school years, an important time in a young lady's life. Growing out of defensive habits built during the awkward early teenage eras, developing a true sense of identity and interests beyond what she was born into. Claire Fisher walked so the most basic of alts can run free. What is refreshing and underrated about her character is that she's not written to be a smarmy female lead. She's not a projection or an imagination of how teen girls should be. It's refreshing that we can see her act like a normal kid even though she's dealing with a lot. We see her putting glue on her hands to let dry and peel off. She's a very typical teen even though she is unique and our main character. We see the most of her development just for the fact we are introduced to her while she's a child and we watch her grow up. In season 1, we get a good idea of who Claire thinks she is, and we start to see her as the little sister that we want the best outcome for. For me personally, it's hard to dislike any of the characters for too long because they are so well written that we start to hope for the best through their heartaches. Let's explore how she thinks and acts in the first season. She starts off as a bratty girl whose father's death saved her from becoming settled in a meth den. Literally made one of the worst decisions of her life just before getting the call and making the best decision of her life to leave. I use the term brat in a very loose and non-judgmental sense. I mean, a typical teenager without a developed sense of consequence. Very typical, very common, even with her unnatural upbringing. Most kids don't grow up with death surrounding them the way that she has. But nonetheless, a workaholic father and neurotic people-pleasing mother meant that the kids were neglected. The church taught the consequences, which didn't help simply because bad Christians hyperbolically speak of consequences, letting bad people get away with horrible things. Each kid had their own form of religious trauma, which is another video in itself. An undeveloped sense of consequence means that she engages in risky behaviors without thinking of the consequences or caring about them too much. She knows she doesn't want to end up like the people around her, but she doesn't know how. And this leads to her giving her heart to Gabe after he loses his brother. Claire's relationship with her brothers are developed through the series. She trusts Nate more. They identify with each other, but they also barely know each other. She rejects his genuine concern because concern makes her feelings vulnerable. She doesn't have a pattern of comfort or self-regulation to fall back on, so vulnerability is a danger zone for her. Her parents neglecting her through crucial emotional milestones makes her fall back on avoidance. And she sees Nate's concern as an attempt to control. When avoidant people start to feel controlled, despite the other person's intentions, they are remembering the times that they've been told what to do by people who didn't really support them. They have been bossed around and criticized, feeling very small, and if this happens more often than not, they will react to any concern the way Claire did. You can tell that it hurts her he would try to act concerned about her after essentially ditching her and not keeping in touch. There are a few kinds of neglect, but Claire suffers from neglect through space and time. Neglect through space, meaning people only come to her when they need something or to criticize, then walk away to deal with their own life. Neglect through time, meaning a shallow interest in her true well-being. While Nate is a good brother for noticing and saying anything at all, doing more than his dad really did, he was neglected too and doesn't understand that you can't just set a person down and walk away to let them fend for themselves. I've gotten the "you're not my mother" screech from my siblings when we were growing up, and while I have a true interest in their well-being, at the time I was neglected and had no idea how to handle it properly. That being said, I've never left them totally behind just to where my relationship with them is just visiting at the holidays like Nate did to Claire. We've all had our moments of growth and space away from each other, but I've never had the thought that I didn't care or want to know how each of them was doing. Nate coming back into Claire's life and staying was one of the best things that could have happened to her. Through her, he realizes where he needs to step up. In the store, she refuses to let Nate act like a baby. He's a man-child, but she's an actual child. He cries about needing a moment to himself, but is old enough to have dependents. That's a privilege when people need you. He's used to getting what he wants, and although he's not wrong to have his feelings hurt by Brenda's reaction to him, it's so important as an older sibling, parent, or role model in general to not take out your emotions on younger people. They don't know any better, and big or small, it's traumatic. Claire deserves to have her pain prioritized. It's strange how some people are never taught to balance their personal life with their family. At some point, it becomes purposeful, but another reality is that the emotion is felt, but words cannot be put into it. Nate deals with his personal issues while out with his sister, not living in the moment. She grounds him. It's refreshing seeing a mutual instance of vulnerability and support without it becoming these characters' personality. Claire isn't the constant voice of reason or a token female. She has the most reason to feel completely shaken and lost without her dad. Hers and Nate's subsequent conversation shows again that his mentality hasn't evolved much since being Claire's age. What's interesting is that at the beginning, Claire's youth makes her the least developed and most shallow character. Most of what can be said about her is very relative to the people around her, more so than her own feelings and reactions, because she hasn't had much to feel or react to. Her past is that she was a little girl. The parts of her life we didn't see happened exactly how she explains it to us through the way she talks to other characters. Not only does she have a strict adherence to being herself in any context, she has no reason to lie or look back on anything with the intent to rewrite. Overall, I think that in season 1, Claire is given some of the best groundwork laid in a TV series for the characters she develops into further down the line. Her character is given a very rich soul, and although we learn so much from each character during the series in their respective timelines, we're with Claire the longest.